told you about the kid Timothy White, and he was kidnapped when I was a kid. Remember I told you about him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a kid that he went to the same school that I went to, okay? And this was a long time ago, and this guy named, what is that guy's name? Ken Parnell. I keep wanting to say like Parcell. I think it's Ken Parnell. Kidnapped Timothy White, or Timmy White. And he also kidnapped another kid. What was the other kid's name? You know what? His name slips my mind at the moment. But he had kidnapped that kid prior to this. And had that kid for like 7 years. Can you imagine that?
It's a long time.
Yeah, just insane. This guy was a lunatic. He was a horrible person, and he needed to be put in prison like forever. But he should have been in prison before all this, because he had done similar things to other kids prior to kidnapping these two kids. And he had gone to prison like for short times and got out and continued doing the same stuff. I mean, it was just crazy. And then he got out. He got a relatively short sentence for what he did with these two kids. And he got out again, and he tried to do the same thing again. And this time he ended up going back to prison, and he ended up dying in prison. But I'm like, how many times does this guy get to kidnap kids? I mean, why does he keep getting let out to kidnap people? That's not right.
How many chances are they going to give him?
Hey, yeah, it's ridiculous. So anyway, he kidnapped this kid named Timmy White, or Timothy White. And I don't know why I can't remember the other kid's name. I know there's a story about him. He didn't even remember his last name. He told the police, I know my first name is Tommy, I think he said. Anyway, I'll probably remember the name in a minute. But anyway, so he got kidnapped. The guy kidnapped the kid, Timmy, okay?
Yeah.
Well, Timmy went to the same school that I did. He was younger than me, though, by a few years. And just a very crazy... And there's some other things about it that I'm not going to say right now, but I do want to make a show about that. But he said, he enlisted the help of another kid to help him kidnap this kid, Timmy, okay?
Yeah.
And so he got this other teenager to help him do this. And they spotted Timothy White, and they made up some story about having, a flat tire or, trouble with their tire or something like that. And they wanted Timothy White to help them with their tire. Like hold the valve stem while I pump up the tire, some kind of BS like that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the kid didn't fall for it, and he took off running. And the older kid ran after him and caught him. And Timothy White was holding on to a chain link fence, probably for dear life.
Oh, yeah.
Holding on with his fingers. And this other kid pried this kid's fingers, this kid's hands, off of the fence. Okay? And then took him kicking and screaming to the car where the adult was, the guy, Ken Parnell, the kidnapper. And threw him in the car, and they covered him up and, gave him some drugs or something, made him fall asleep. Anyway, so can you imagine the terror that kid was feeling?
Yeah.
Here he is being pried off of a fence that he's hanging onto for dear life and carried away by this other kid and thrown into the back of a car being kidnapped. And then the guy apparently tried to convince the kid that, his parents didn't want him anymore. He said something like, your parents couldn't afford you. And yeah, I know, right? Your parents couldn't afford you. And they wanted me to take care of you, raise you from now on. And they didn't want you anymore because they couldn't afford you. So I'm your new dad. And this, I don't know, some kind of totally crazy BS story like that, right?
Yeah, he didn't feel bad.
Oh,
and,
I'm sure he
believe
felt all
it.
sorts of things, you know what I mean? But yeah, so anyway, and then he like dyed the kid's hair, you know?
Yeah.
Well, ultimately, the kid got away. There was another kid there who was also kidnapped, and that kid was a little bit older, and he helped Timothy White escape. While the kidnapper was at work, they escaped. Like middle of the night, the guy worked graveyard shift, something like that. And they helped him. They escaped together. The older kid helped Timothy White escape, and they ended up. He was trying to get him, like he was going to take him to his home or something, but he was a little kid. And he couldn't remember like how to get to his house, but he remembered where his babysitter's house was. So initially, they went over to the babysitter's house, but the babysitter, like nobody was home. So they left, and he couldn't find his regular house, but they found the police station. So the older kid took him over there and said, "Go in there and tell them who you are." And he did. And the police apparently, like at first, I don't know if they, I seem to recall that they weren't sure like if they should take it serious at first. And at first, at first the kid was scared to go in there. Like he started to go up there, the kid, Timmy White. He started to go up to the police door, but then he was scared to go in there.
Yeah.
So he ran back to the kid who was helping him escape, you know, and out of fear, he ran back and told that kid, like, you know, I don't want to go in there, or I'm scared, or something like that.
Right.
Well, so that kid walked him in there, and I think the police saw it, and they're like went out to investigate, like, hey, what's going on here, you know, kids, what's going on? And then from there, you know, just, you know, they just told him, you know, what was going on.
What about the older kid, though?
Oh, yeah, through that. Okay, so that one, they figured out who he was, but they said it was like it took a long time. They had to go through because he had that kid for 7 years.
Yeah.
So they had to go through a lot of missing persons pictures.
They couldn't do a DNA test?
They didn't have DNA. I mean, DNA existed back then. They didn't have DNA technology back then.
Oh.
It wasn't used. I mean, it wasn't even at all used back then. Yeah, it didn't exist, so to say. So they, sorry, I got a little distracted there. They found who this kid was through the missing persons pictures and something else he had told them. They figured out who he was, and they're like, whoa, this kid is a kid who's missing, you know, from 7 years ago. And then this is Timmy White, who's been missing for, you know, less time than I don't know how long it was at that point. And so they arrested the guy by the next morning. Okay, the kidnapper, because the kids told him where he was, where he worked, what his name is, what he looked like, all this and that. So the police arrested him the next morning, like by the next morning.
Right.
And I think they went to his place of work and arrested him. Well, you know, and they reunited the older kid, who was at that time, he was 14, and he was kidnapped when he was 7. So they reunited him with his family, with his, you know, his mom, I believe it was, and other family. I'm not sure if his dad was there. I'm sure his dad was probably somewhere in the scene. So, and you know, I'm not sure how, you know, that went. If there was, you know, kind of they had to rebond, reconnect. I'm not sure how that played out.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah, just tragic, you know, because it robbed that kid and that family of all those years together, and you know, divided them, and really just created a terrible situation in that family.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so years went by. Years later, the kid Timothy White, he became a police officer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or sheriff deputy in the LA area. Okay. And the other kid who helped to get away, I sure wish I could remember his name. I don't know why I can't. I know his name, but I just can't think of it at the moment. Years later, when he was, I don't know, probably a young adult by that time, might have been in his early 20s maybe, And I think he was married and had a child, maybe 2 children, I'm not sure.
Right.
Well, he was killed in a motorcycle wreck. Yeah, the kid who was kidnapped, the older kid. Can you believe that? What a tragic story.
Wow.
So he's kidnapped, 7 years old, he's away from his family, his mom, his dad, his siblings, he's away from them for years. And then he comes back, he gets found, he comes back home. Well, kind of has to reconnect with them. And then he gets in a motorcycle wreck and is killed. I mean, it's just terrible. Well, Timothy White, who becomes a police officer or sheriff's deputy in the LA area, he actually helped put Parnell away for life, the guy who kidnapped him.
Good.
He helped put him away for life. Because that guy Parnell, remember I told you he tried to do the same thing to another kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had Timothy White come and testify about what this guy had done to him, how the kidnapping went down, all this and that. And they had other people that knew about that previous case testify at this hearing and at this trial. So that's why Parnell got, that helped put Parnell away forever at that point,
Good.
which was great, yeah. Well, interestingly, remember I told you that the guy Parnell had another kid help him? He would use another kid to lure kids to kidnap?
Yeah.
Well, that kid was also grown up now too, and Timothy White was at this time a sheriff deputy, was a grown man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that other kid was there too, testifying against him.
Good.
And they had not seen each other, Timothy White and the kid who helped kidnap him. Had not seen each other since they were kids.
Yeah.
And can you imagine that?
Oh man, that must have been kind of interesting.
Can you imagine seeing the person who was a teenager and who pried your hands off of a fence that you were hanging onto for dear life? Can you imagine that?
I would be holding a grudge.
Yeah. So, and I wonder what the other guy was thinking. Well, anyway, they said the other guy apologized to him, and they're like in their 30s at this point.
Yeah.
They said the other guy had apologized to him, and I guess Timothy White said, it's okay, or I don't know if he said, it's okay, I forgive you, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think he said it's okay, I have a good life now, I have a good wife, something like that. Because he was married too, and he had a couple kids. So the guy Parnell, the scumbag, he gets put away forever, and he dies in prison, actually a few years later.
Good.
He doesn't even live that long. He had all sorts of health problems. And a few years later, he died, and the world became a better place because that guy's a scumbag. Well, now the other kid who was kidnapped, like I told you, he died in a motorcycle wreck, tragically, right?
Yeah.
Well, after that trial, a little bit later after that, Timothy White died.
No.
Yeah.
Why?
It's like-
What happened? How?
He had some sort of health complication.
Oh.
He died. He wasn't killed or murdered, but he had some sort of health complication. And he died. And it's like, man, this story is just like continual tragedies.
At least he got justice.
Yeah, he got to face that dude down. And it said he looked right at him in the trial. The guy was on trial. Timothy White was now a grown man in his 30s and was a police officer.
Yeah.
And he was on the witness stand staring that dude down, the guy who kidnapped him.
Yeah.
He was right there. And he pointed at him. They said, is the person who kidnapped you, here today? And he said, yeah. And he something to the effect of he pointed at him and said, yeah, that's him right there, and pointed right at him and said, Ken Parnell, or I don't know, something like that, whatever his name is. I think it's Ken or Ken or something like that. And that's him right there. Man, that had to feel good.
Yeah.
Put that scumbag in his place. Just even if it's a brief thing, but to at least know that you faced him as a man, a grown man.
Yeah.
And you had a part in putting him away.
Yeah. Yeah, but at least he got justice, because
Yeah, that's what I mean.
that's like something you'll never forget.
Oh, yeah.
I totally lost what I was saying.
So, yeah, it was good. It was good that he got to do that. And then, unfortunately, he passed away. After that, I don't know how soon after that, but it's just like that story is just like unending tragedies, like just continuous, like one tragedy after another. I mean, you got the first kid who was kidnapped at 7, ripped from his family, kept for 7 years. You got Timothy White, who was kidnapped, and they attempted to kidnap multiple other kids, but were unsuccessful. And he had other kids try to help get him, like, to try to help him kidnap other children, right? Well, so you have those tragedies. Then this guy Parnell, he created a tragedy in other people's lives, okay? Then the first kid, he dies. I think his name is Stephen. Yes, it is Stephen. The first, the older kid that helped Timothy White escape. Stephen Stayner, that's his name. Yep, okay, glad I just remembered. So anyway, so then Stephen Stayner dies in a motorcycle wreck. Timothy White dies of a health complication. And, well, Parnell dying, that's not a tragedy, that's a good thing. And it's just like, what the heck, man? Like, how can so much tragedy be in this group? I don't want to say group, like they're together, because you know what? Yeah, that's not right to link them together, because that scumbag is not, Parnell is not part of them. So, but yeah, just tragedy after tragedy after tragedy.
That's something you can heal from, but not something you can ever forget. So the fact that Timothy got to die with the thought of that guy is forever gone and will not be able to hurt another child or little boy again.
Yeah.
I'm sure he felt at least relieved about that.
Yeah, exactly. I bet he did too. So that's awesome. But and he also, Timothy White was also was married, and I think he had 2 children as well. So that's nice. You know, he's got kids. But wow, what a crazy story. And that all happened where I grew up. Like I said, me and Timothy White went to the same school.
Yeah.
And yeah, wow, just shocking, just so shocking.
Was he like 10